DFS, Degen Nation. What is up? What is happening? We are back again. It is week 3. And this slate looks really good. We talked about that before the show. I actually really like this slate. We get a lot of the elite plays that are back for this week that we didn't have on last week's slate because of, most of them are off the slate, played on prime time and stuff like that. So there's a ton of different ways you can go this week. So let's not waste anybody's time. Let's jump right into it. So as we always do, we go position by position. We start out at the quarterback position this week. In terms of the elite plays, let's drop down to the 6K range. We have Josh Allen at 8,200, Lamar Jackson at 8K, Patrick Mahomes at 7,900, Jalen Hurts at 76, Herbert at 74, Kyler Murray at 73, Kirk Cousins at 6,700, Joe Burrow at 66, Matt Stafford at 65, Aaron Rodgers 64, Wentz at 63, and Tua Tagovailoa at 61, and Tom Brady at 6K. So, Maddie, where are you going if you're going to play one of these, more expensive quarterbacks this week?
Yeah, so I mean, I can really make a case for any of these guys, right? I mean, Josh Allen, don't really have to go into him too much, but we've seen this Miami defense will give up a ton of big plays, which they just showed last week. Freaking 40-40 football game against Baltimore. So, I think the Buffalo-Miami game is a very interesting one to stack up. And Buffalo's dealing with a couple injuries to their defensive backs. I know Micah Hyde has been hurt, and they've got another safety or corner that's dealing with a injury as well. So there's some injuries to pay attention to there in the Buffalo secondary that could really benefit the Miami side, which would ultimately make this turn into another potential massive shootout in Miami. So really hard to get away from Josh Allen if paying all the way up. So he would probably be my pick, but I mean, it's hard to knock what Jalen Hurts is doing right now. He looks really, really good in that Philly offense. That offensive line is the best in the league, and he just has all the time in the world to throw. And not only that, but he's got Devontae Smith and AJ Brown running routes down the field, and then Quez Watkins, who can run past anybody. So it's really hard not to like Jalen Hurts once again here, and playing Washington, who's just given up a ton of points to Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence in the first 2 weeks. So it does kind of feel like a somewhat trappy spot though, after having a big win at home in prime time against the Vikings, and to turn around and have a 1:00 road game in Washington, which seems like a very easily winnable game. It just feels a little, the spot just feels a little trappy to me, but and it's solely because we've seen teams time and time again fall short of expectations when they have a big win at home and then turn around and go on the road early the next week. So not saying I'm out on the Eagles, but I would say there is a little bit of that that narrative that surrounds teams that have a big win followed by a shorter week the next week. So I still have interest in Hurts, and also Mahomes is right there as well, facing an Indy team on the road. And we know the Chiefs defense doesn't play nearly as well on the road as they do at home. So Mahomes tends to have his bigger games on the road as well. So he's definitely in play up top. And then outside of that, if you're not playing any of those top guys, it's really hard not to like the Detroit-Minnesota game with Cousins and Goff. The Lions are really, that offense looks a lot better than what a lot of people were going to give them credit for heading into the season. Amon-Ra looks like the real deal. He's getting a ton of targets every single week. I think he's got 25 fantasy points in like his last 8 games or something ridiculous. But he's obviously a great play to pair with Goff. So that's a very easy stack to make. And Swift, it sounds like Swift is trending in the right direction for, being a little more healthy this week than he was last week. And he still looked really good last week on limited touches. So that Lions offense should continue to put up points, and the Minnesota defense is non-existent. So, and same can be said for the Detroit defense, non-existent there as well. We've seen them give up big games to Philly, and then Wentz had to come from behind. He started out slow, but ended up putting up a monster game with another 30-point game against Detroit last week for Washington. So I really like Cousins here. And the very opposite of what I just said for Philly is in play for Minnesota, a team that just disappointed in primetime on the road. Now gets to come home for a 1:00 start, at home against a very, very shoddy defense in Detroit. So it's after they just let down everybody, everybody was on Justin Jefferson and Cousins and the whole Minnesota crew. They just let everybody down in prime time. This is a perfect bounce back spot for them at home against Detroit. So I really like that game. And then there's one game, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. One game that I'm on that I haven't decided whether I'm going to go the QB route or the running back route. And if I go the QB route, I'm definitely going to fully stack this game. But Cincinnati and the Jets. The Jets actually rank first in terms of pace of play overall, and they're fourth in in pace of play when you factor in a neutral score. So that's within one touchdown. They're snapping the ball every 25 seconds, which is fourth in that neutral situation. So they're getting up. Joe Flacco isn't wasting any time. They want to play fast, and they're letting Flacco throw the ball. The Jets, they actually are, in the top half of the league in pass rate over expectation. So they want to get up and throw the ball. And meanwhile, Cincinnati, they have faced two teams to start the year that are running, this famous cover two, Tampa 2, whatever you want to call it. That we've seen teams run to try to slow down Mahomes and to try to slow down Josh Allen over the last 2 years. Now they're trying to do the same thing to the Bengals. So it's forced the Bengals to not be able to take as many deep shots down the field. But I'm just not sure that this Jets team can really rely on that, because they don't have the pass rush that the Steelers had in Week 1 against the Bengals with a healthy TJ Watt, or that the Dallas Cowboys had in Week 2. And really, that Bengals O-line has been their massive issue. They've given up 13 sacks through 2 games, and they've finally started to look somewhat good on that offensive line in the second half of that Dallas game. So, I think that offensive line is going to turn a corner, and the Jets are almost dead last in pressuring the QB. I think they only have 3 sacks through 2 games. So I think this is an absolute blow-up spot for Cincinnati. And you can make a case for Mixon if the Jets want to come out and just run that little cover 2 where they just have 4 guys up front and dare the Bengals to run the ball. Mixon, he's a great play, but if that's not working and the Jets have to resort to a different game plan, Jamar Chase could absolutely blow the top off the New York Jets. We've seen, anytime Burrow has time to throw, Jamar Chase can get behind anybody. So I am really toying with the idea of stacking up that game. I like Burrow. I like T. Higgins. He's relatively cheap at like $6K. Jamar Chase is going to be expensive, but he is going to be absolutely unowned. So I really like the idea of playing Chase and Mixon as well. And then on the other side, it's very easy to run it back with the Jets. You've got Elijah Moore's $5K and Garrett Wilson, who's getting all the targets he can handle. He's only $5,800. So that's a very cheap game that I think is going to be absolutely unowned at we're talking 2% across the board for all the main pieces here. So, that Cincinnati Jets game for large field tournaments, I think is probably the sharpest game you can stack this week.
Yeah, firstly, Walito coming in with a $50 super chat. We appreciate you, my guy. DJ Nation Pod, what is up? I'm with you, Maddie. Love Burrow Higgins stack this week.
Yep. Walito, I just really like that game in general. I don't think people are talking enough about how fast the Jets are trying to play. And their offense, they've put up points both weeks now. I mean, yes, it was 9 points against Baltimore, but they came back. They scored a touchdown late in that fourth quarter, and they put up a ton of points against a bad Browns defense last week. So this Bengals defense, I mean, they gave up points to Mitch Trubisky week 1, and then just lost to a Cooper Rush-led Cowboys team in week 2. So I absolutely think Joe Flacco, who just threw for over 300 yards, can put up points on the Bengals D2 and force Cincinnati to, have to keep their foot on the pedal. So I just really like that game, and nobody's going to play it. Absolutely nobody's going to play it.
Yeah, and this feels like a really get back right spot for Cincinnati.
Yep.
Here, I mean, their offenses look nothing like what anybody expected it to look like through these first 2 weeks of the season. So,
I think honestly, week 3 feels like the week of the guys that just haven't done anything yet, who will end up doing something, are due to explode. But everybody's playing the guys that have already exploded. Because if you look at ownership, everybody wants to play Amon-Ra as like the highest owned wide receiver, and for good reason. Stephon Diggs is right up there with Amon-Ra, and these are two guys that have just exploded over the last 2 weeks. But nobody wants to play Jamar Chase, but we know Jamar Chase can put up 50 points. He did it last year. Like, he's going to be 2% owned. So it's like, it just feels like it's a week where, don't play the guys that have just smashed in weeks 1 and 2 just because they smashed in weeks 1 and 2. It's a great week to, be forward thinking and think about the guys that are going to smash this season at some point, and which guys are in good spots to do that, because they're going to do it sooner or later. And I mean, David Njoku tonight is a perfect example, right? He had a combined like 4 fantasy points over the first 2 games, but he's been on the field, the entire time. And now finally he's gotten a role, and it's a pass catching role that we thought he would get, and he's absolutely smashing tonight. So it's just I think Njoku is a perfect example for week 3. Like, don't just make teams based on what guys have done in weeks 1 and 2. Try to be, forward thinking here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's a pretty sharp take too. I think you're right. I think a lot of people are going to, funnel towards the guys that have been doing the best, and playoff recency bias. And it's still too early in the season to be writing a lot of these players off or these teams off. But for me this week, I know you mentioned him, but I think you glossed over him, was Patrick Mahomes. Absolutely love him at 7,900. This is a great matchup for them against the Colts. They get to face a Gus Bradley defense, and here are the stats for Patrick Mahomes against Gus Bradley defenses. He has 7.61 yards per attempt, 17 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, and a 65% completion percentage in the 7 games that they faced a Gus Bradley-led defense. We know Gus Bradley in his career is one of those guys who doesn't really adjust all that much. He believes in his single high safety, and we know that Patrick Mahomes absolutely eats single high safety coverages alive. That's why so many teams have switched to the 2 high safety looks, and what gave him a little bit of troubles last year. If they don't change that, this Chiefs offense is going to explode in this game. And it's kind of interesting because I've kind of played around with a little bit of builds, just kind of seeing what you can get, because Patrick Mahomes is 7,900. And then you also have Travis Kelce, who is massively priced up at also 7,900. Doing so, you have to make some concessions, but I think also pairing them with I think you can do a Juju Smith-Schuster, or even if you wanted to get a little bit different and go with like a MVS who could, because if they're going to be seeing a lot of single high, you're going to see them open this up, and they're going to take quite a few deep shots in this game. And so you could see an MVS break loose, or you could also see like a McCall Hardman as well. So I love Patrick Mahomes at 7,900. I think a lot of people are going to go with some of these other options around him, like Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. This is going to all be pretty flat, and I don't think he's going to have the ownership that he should. And this is a very good matchup, even if it is on the road inside a dome against the Colts. And this Colts team is the same team that just got beat 20-0 and then tied the Houston Texans. So this defense is not this is something I'm really all that concerned with here in Indianapolis. So I love Patrick Mahomes at 7,900. And then you already talked about him, but Jared Goff. I really like Jared Goff this week at $5,800 on DraftKings. And, right now Minnesota has been not great against the pass this year. They ranked 23rd in pass DVOA, and they've also allowed the 10th most DK points to the position. The Lions actually are also another team that has been played very fast this year. They actually ranked 4th in pace of play this year, which was a little surprising to me. And Goff also ranks 10th in air yards per attempt and 11th in fantasy points per dropback this year. So Jared Goff has been very good, and this offense has been very good. And it's something that we talked about around here all offseason, was that we thought that this Lions offense was going to be much better than what people were going to expect. And with Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a stud, he's a star. Like it is now confirmed that he's a stud, right? Because all offseason it was, well, we don't really know if he's as good as he was. He only did that because Swift and Hawkinson were out. Well, now those guys are playing, and he is still absolutely crushing. So I love the fact. I don't know if you saw on Twitter today that he is every time he is he plays somebody that was drafted ahead of him in the draft. He kind of marks it off his list.
I did see that.
So I thought that was hilarious. But anyways, so I do think Jared Goff, who is cheap, I think is definitely in play. I think a couple different options. I do love the Joe Burrow call. I think are stacking up that game. But I also really like Derek Carr, who's only $5,900, going up against this Titans defense that just looks dreadful. They lost Harold Landry in the preseason, which is a big blow to that pass rush.
And that's another big bounce back spot too, because everybody was on Vegas last week against Arizona.
Yeah, against Arizona, yes. And so I think Derek Carr, who's a little bit cheaper actually this week at $5,900, I think is another direction we could go. And then last, I think like somebody like Stafford is fine at $6,500 against the same Arizona Cardinals team. But I think right now the way I'm going to probably look to go is either I'm going to pay up for Mahomes or, of course, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but depending on how many teams I play, but I'm definitely going to have a lot of Mahomes. I like going in that kind of middle direction of Joe Burrow, who's only 6,600 in that big bounce back spot, and then Jared Goff. I don't think you need to go down below Jared Goff. Like the quarterbacks that are down there, like there's nobody that really stands out to me that I'm just like, oh man, I definitely want to play that guy. The Trevor Lawrence, against the Chargers, I really don't want that. Marcus Mariota against Seattle, like he offers some rushing upside, but I would just find the $300 more, the $400 more, and pay for Goff or Carr. And so, really, there's no quarterbacks that are really cheap this week that I really want to play. The lowest I want to go is $5,800 Jared Goff.
Yeah, I would just play Jared Goff. The only guy down there that I stopped and briefly even thought about was Matt Ryan, 5,200, and that's just because he's going to have to throw the ball to keep up with Kansas City. And he put up 20 points in week one and that, they just looked awful last week. I can't bring myself to do it.
Only thing I would say though is they didn't have Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman sounds like he's going to play. He's been practicing all week, so it sounds like he is training, and so is Alec Pierce, their second round pick. He also looks like he is going to return. And I will mention with the Chiefs, they did lose Trent McDuffie. I don't know what happened there, but the Chiefs lost Trent McDuffie, who is their starting corner for that team, and so and as well as not just Trent McDuffie, but also Willie Gay was also suspended for the next 4 games over something that happened, I think, last offseason for breaking a vacuum. Ridiculous. Legitimately, that's exactly what happened. Oh, you're back. I don't know what you did.
I was clicking tabs and accidentally X'd out of the StreamYard.
Anyway, so what I was saying was the Chiefs' defense is going to be a little bit underpowered. Because Trent McDuffie's out. He was placed on IR, short-term IR. And then also they lost Willie Gay, who got suspended for breaking a vacuum. That's literally $200 vacuum of his because she wouldn't let him into the NICU and to see his son. And so he broke a vacuum because he was pissed off, and he got suspended 4 games for that. So anyways, so the Chiefs defense, I guess, could be had if you really wanted to go to Matt Ryan. I think you could, but I just don't think it's needed with all the options we have available to us this week at quarterback. Anyways,
I agree.
Yeah,
I don't think it's a week to get a QB. Play one of the good guys, one of the good QBs in a great matchup, and don't overthink it. And ownership's going to be spread out enough because there are so many good guys and good matchups that I would just play the guys that you want to play.
Yeah. All right. So you want to move over to running back?
Yep.
Actually, let's do our normal routine here. Give me your top 3 plays at quarterback for you this week.
I'll say my favorite up top. I'm probably just going to stick with Josh Allen. And then mid-range, Joe Burrow, and cheap, Jared Goff.
All right. Well, I'm very similar to you. I have Mahomes, I have Burrow, and then I have Goff. So, and then if we want somebody different, because we're all one the same, I do
Cousins.
like Carr quite a bit, and then Cousins would be the other
Yep.
option. Yeah.
I am right there with you. I think one of those five is where I will. And somebody we didn't even touch on is Matt Stafford. Against Arizona. Arizona is absolute dog shit. Especially against the pass. So, Stafford very well could go overlooked. He's 6,500. He's going to be in the middle of the pack. And Arizona plays a ton of man coverage. And we saw last week that Allen Robinson is going to be, utilized more in matchups where there's more man coverage. The Bills played a ton of zone in week 1. And Robinson couldn't seem to, shake that. So I think, Stafford, Kupp, and Robinson, or even Stafford and one of Kupp or Robinson and Higbee. Higbee's getting a ton of targets as well, and tight ends crush Arizona. So, I don't hate Stafford at all either. And they're one of the highest. Rams, Chiefs, Bills, like these are the offenses that are going to score the most points on a weekly basis. So, and they throw the ball a lot. So, yeah, any week Stafford's going overlooked against a defense as bad as Arizona, I definitely have interest.
Yeah, I mean the Rams too, in terms of implied point totals this week, is what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sixth highest implied point total of the week. 26. I will say that it has dropped. They opened at 28. It has dropped down to 26, but still, that is still a very healthy implied point.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
For a team that, doesn't really rely a ton on running backs.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and jump over to the running back position. And so, we mentioned, Jonathan Taylor is at the top at $9K. He actually saw a price reduction. He was at $9,900 last week. This week, he drops down to $9K. Christian McCaffrey at $8,800, Derrick Henry at $8,100, Austin Eckler at $8K, Dalvin Cook at $79, Joe Mixon at $76, Aaron Jones at $74, DeAndre Swift at $7,200, Kamara $7K, and then at the $6K range you have Fournette at $6,500, Gibson $6,400, Clyde Edwards-Helaire $6,300, James Conner, who is questionable, at $62, James Robinson at $61, and then AJ Dillon at $6K. So in terms of this top group, I will say for me, I love Fournette, especially with all of the options that are out this week for the pack or for the Bucks.
Yep,
he's too cheap at $6,500. The man is top 5 in opportunity share for him as well. So I just love Leonard Fournette. The only thing that really hasn't been there for him so far this year has been the targets. But other than that, he has an 81% opportunity share in this offense. Which is absolutely elite, top 4 among all running backs. He is the man in this offense. The only thing, like I said, that I would like to see more of is targets, because he only has 6 on the year, which is a little surprising for him considering how much he was utilized last year. But Mike Evans is suspended. He's not playing. Chris Godwin sounds unlikely he's going to play. Julio Jones is still very much up in the air if he's even going to play or not. We'll see on that. So we're looking at guys like Rashad Perriman. We're looking at guys like Scotty Miller and Russell Gage as being Tom Brady's main targets here in this offense. And so I think Leonard Fournette is going to see a healthy amount of targets in this game against the Packers, who have a very good secondary as well. And then I also think Austin Eckler is due for a really big game. I mean, he hasn't had really one this year so far. He's been good, not great so far this season. He has not scored a touchdown after scoring 20 touchdowns last year, but he's only 8K. I really like getting to him against Jacksonville. And then I think kind of like along the same lines you were talking about, Dalvin Cook. I think he bounces back in a big way against this Lions defense at 7,900. Those are the 3 top guys that are kind of in this upper tier range of running backs that I really like. Who are you coming in on?
Yeah, I'm right there. I'm right there with you on each guy you just mentioned. I just wanted to reiterate on Fournette. He's probably going to come in as the highest owned running back, and I simply don't care. He is too cheap for the workload he gets, and this matchup that he gets. We just saw David Montgomery just run all over the Packers in a game they were losing, the whole time. So it's a spot I'm just gonna ignore ownership and just play Leonard Fournette. I think he's the best play on the slate from a just a overall optimal standpoint. It's the same, and Saquon Barkley didn't work out last week, but it's the same play as Barkley last week that I'm just gonna play him. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's projecting as the best spot at too low of cost at a position that has been very hit or miss this year. I like what every running back was awful last week except for Nick Chubb, pretty much. So it's like, if you are confident in a running back is going to have success, just play him, because the running back position has been a absolute disaster through 2 weeks. So the one guy you didn't mention in this top tier that I want to touch on is Joe Mixon, and I already touched on him once, but I definitely think he's in play if you're not interested in Burrow, because I think that this is a get right spot for Cincinnati. And we saw Mixon, all year last year. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games of over 25 DK points, and 1, 2, 3 of those were over 28, 2 over 30. So he can definitely get up there. And I love the Eckler call as well. I know the Chargers were trailing the Chiefs all last week, but Eckler saw 10 targets and to go along with his 14 carries. So it's, had 14 carries and 4 targets in week 1 in a game that, they were playing from in front. So he's pretty much going to see 20 plus touches or opportunities. And like you said, a guy that scored so many touchdowns last year hasn't scored any yet through 2 weeks and is still putting up fantasy points. That's, it just feels like it's such an obvious play, but I feel like, with his price being 8K, that people aren't going to play him. He's currently coming in under 10% owned projected. So yeah, I really like the Eckler call a lot, and I'm not going to get cute at running back, and I'm not playing running back in the flex with how, shoddy that position's been this year. So I'm going to end up with, Fournette and one of those other guys that we talked about. Then there's one guy I want to get your thoughts on, and that's Cordarrell Patterson. 5,800 against Seattle, a team that has, historically last year and this year so far, given up an ungodly amount of targets to the running back position. 5,800, he saw an absolutely ridiculous workload in week 1. And then last week, he didn't see as much of a workload, but it was against the Rams. So I don't want to, factor in that matchup too much, especially when we get, a matchup with Seattle here. So do you have any interest in Cordarrell Patterson?
I don't mind him. I get the matchup part of it. He hasn't been seeing as many targets as I thought he would actually see. He did see 5 week 1, but he only saw 1 last week, and especially in a game that they were trailing. I thought that was a little odd, to say the least. But he still is playing about 60. He's handling about 60% of the opportunities in his backfield. We did see Tyler Algier get a little bit more opportunities last week. He didn't get to play week 1, but then he played this week at 30. But he did play 30% of the snaps, 10 carries. But he was also not involved in the passing game either. But Cordarrell Patterson, he's super explosive, and like you mentioned, it is a really good matchup for him. And so again, I don't mind playing him, and I think he's a viable option. Where is he at? So yeah, he's not even really Cordarrell Patterson's not even really running routes either. He's only running about 11 routes per game, which is 35th among all running backs right now.
Interesting.
And so I don't really know the reasoning behind that, behind why they're not using him more as a pass catcher, because that's kind of where he was utilized a little bit more last year. But right now, he's not. But it is a good matchup. But I think there's other options. Walito actually has a question about the other running back on the that is right above him. He wants to know what's projected ownership for David Montgomery. I'm guessing it's probably top 3.
You're correct. He's second highest behind only Fournette.
Yeah, he's 5,900 against Houston.
And that is not somebody I want to play at high ownership.
No. I would agree. I do not love him. And actually, if I wanted to get cute, I would actually just go to the other side of that game and play Dameon Pierce, who's 5K. Because Chicago has been dreadful against the run this year.
Yep.
And so, and we saw Dameon Pierce last week get 15 carries in that game. They really utilized him a lot more heavily in that way. And so, Nick Chubb just scored. And so for me, I think when you look at that, I think I would just get leverage right off of David Montgomery and just go to Dameon Pierce. We're still talking about 2 really bad offenses.
I don't hate the Dameon Pierce call at all.
Yeah. And so Alito, You can play David Montgomery, but if he's going to be that high owned, I would rather fade him, especially cost included. So, anyways, so speaking of this lower tier range of running back, is there anybody that you do have interest in here in this range? Because we have like you already mentioned Cordarrell Patterson. You have the Rams running backs. Darrell Henderson's 5,700. Cam Akers is only 5,500. Miles Sanders is only 5,500. And then you have guys like Devin Singletary, Jamal Williams, Josh Jacobs is only 5,400. That seems pretty cheap for him. And then that's Chase Edmonds is 5,100, but then you also I think have Raheem Mostert, who actually handled more of this backfield last week, who's also in that range. But I don't know about you, but I don't love any of the 5K range. Like I said, Dameon Pierce, I will have some of just because I think that he's a nice leverage play off of David Montgomery, and I like this matchup for him, and he's only 5K. If I'm gonna drop down, I'm gonna drop down to him. But other than that, like this 5K range is a little gross. Like I would love to play Cam Akers at 5,500, but I really just don't know what they're doing right now with this backfield. We did see Cam Akers get more involved last week, but it's still more of a committee right now. And then other than that, that's kind of where I'm at. Maybe Miles Sanders, but he's not involved in the passing game either.
Yeah, I think if you had if you had to make me choose, I think the Jets guys are interesting, just because of how much Flacco throws to the running back position. I mean, Breece Hall saw 9 targets in week 1. He only saw 1 target last week, but Michael Carter's seen 9 targets and 5 targets in the first 2 weeks. So I think one of those two guys. And then the other guy I'm just going to keep, I mentioned him last week. I'm going to just keep an eye out on him, Travis Etienne. I think at some point, he's going to be more involved. I mean, he's running a route on pretty much half of the dropbacks. And I think his volume is going to go up as the season goes on. And this is a game that they should trail, the majority of the time. So I would think he would play more than Robinson in this game. But, Robinson, has looked better than we all thought he would coming off an Achilles injury. So, he has definitely earned his share of that offensive backfield. So those would be the only guys I would even consider. But I just don't think this is a week you need to do it. I think, you play one of those guys up top, whether it's Eckler, Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Jonathan Taylor, and pair him with Fournette and just move on and figure out wide receiver.
Yeah, because I think the running back position is a little gross.
It is.
Here. I mean, there's some guys definitely at the top that I really like, but if you're wanting to play the high price wide receivers, there's not like those, slam dunk options in the lower tier that we're usually kind of accustomed to seeing, right? Because like this week, just that 5K range is just kind of really gross to me. Like there's not many that stand out. David Montgomery's obviously, but he's going to be so highly owned at 5,900. And then, like I said, you have the Miles Sanders, Cam Akers, but all of those guys have major question marks. Cam Akers last week only played. He did see a lot more touches. He had 15 carries, but only played 42% of the snaps. He did have 3 targets, which is somewhat encouraging. But it's just hard to trust all these guys. If you want to take some shots on some of these guys, I don't mind it if you need to, but I just don't think it makes a lot of sense. And like I said, Dameon Pierce, and then I do kind of like the Breece Hall call. He's only 5,300. And then if you want to go to Michael Carter, he's 5,200. Like both those guys are in that range, but I don't know. Like I just can't do it. Like I just don't think you have to do that with these guys. I think I would figure out a way if you want to pay down a little bit at running back and go like Fournette and I don't know, like a CEH or something like that. I think you could do that. Something like that if you're wanting to jam in some of these high priced wide receivers, because wide receivers so far this year is really balled out.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. So let's move over to, if you don't have anybody else to talk about, we can jump over to wide receivers.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. So at wide receiver, we have Cooper Kupp once again at 9,900, who's just on an absolute torrid pace, who is averaging 35.3 fantasy points per game right now through his first 2 games of the season. Justin Jefferson is 9,300. Devontae Adams, 8,400. Jamar Chase is 8,100. Stephon Diggs, too cheap at 7,700. I don't know what the hell he's that cheap for. He should be up there in that at least the 80, the 8 plus K range for sure. And then Tyreek Hill 7,600, AJ Brown 7,300, Amon-Ra St. Brown is starting to move up at 7,200, Michael Pittman at 6,900, Jalen Waddle is 6,800, Mike Williams is 6,700, and then Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, Gabe Davis, Chris Godwin, who is very questionable, and Christian Kirk, T. Higgins, who's too cheap at 6,100, DK Metcalf, and Alan Lazard and Marquise Brown wrap up the 6K range. So, Maddie, I'll let you go first this time. Where are you going with the wide receivers?
So I completely agree. T. Higgins at 6,100 is ridiculously too cheap. That's a guy that can put up 20 to 25 points every single week. He is just, that 6K for a guy that, gets his volume in his caliber of an offense going against the Jets defense this week, where they should have a ton of time to move the ball down the field. That is a very cheap price tag for him. So I like him a lot. This Buffalo-Miami game, I like that game a lot. I can't say I want to play a $7,700 Stephon Diggs when he is the projected highest owned wide receiver on the slate. So I'll probably end up off him. But the Miami side, I mean, Waddle and Tyreek, those guys are definitely going to be in play, especially if the Bills end up missing two of their starting secondary guys. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I already mentioned Jamar Chase, but for all the same reasons I like T. Higgins, I like Chase as well. He just costs 2K more to get up to him. And he's, like I said, he's going to be 2% owned, especially being only $300 cheaper than Devontae Adams. So we know Jamar Chase can break any slate. So very interesting if you can find a way to sneak him on a build. AJ Brown, we saw him absolutely annihilate in week 1. Almost 30 DK points. I would expect him to come in rather low owned, being priced up to 7,300, priced right next to Amon-Ra and right below Stephon Diggs. And those two guys are projecting as the highest owned wide receivers on the slate. So there's a lot of pivot points here at wide receiver that are, in great spots that can absolutely crush. So I really like, a handful of these guys that are not the chalk. And not saying don't play Amon-Ra and don't play Diggs. That's they're good plays for all the reasons that everybody wants to play them. But anytime that guys that cost 7-8K are going to be the highest owned guys on the slate, and there's paths that those guys only get 15 points, I'm just going to take my chances usually and play the guys around them that have the same ceiling and hope that it works out for me. So that is going to be where I end up in this top range, but honestly, I think I'm going to end up with a couple guys from this 5 to 6K range. Like, I know you stopped at 6K, but Michael Thomas, he's running a route on 96% of the Saints dropbacks. He's seen 17 targets through 2 games. He's 5,900 against Carolina. So I really like Michael Thomas here. And I know Jameis Winston's dealing with a back injury, but Thomas is just getting too much volume, and he looks healthy. And he's got, 23 and 18 DK points in back-to-back weeks. So, even if he repeats that at 6K, he's not going to kill you. And he's got he's definitely got a 100-yard ceiling and a touchdown. So I think he's interesting. Drake London has taken over as the alpha in Atlanta, and he's starting to see an absolute ridiculous amount of targets there. He's had 12 targets last week after 7 in week 1, and he didn't even really play in the get any activity in the preseason. So he is starting to take over, and we already mentioned that Seattle defense isn't necessarily something to be scared of. Allen Robinson, already mentioned him. Arizona plays a ton of man coverage, and we saw last week with the Rams facing a man coverage heavy team that Allen Robinson was starting to get more involved in that offense. So his third week with that team, I think Allen Robinson has 100-yard and a touchdown upside with the Rams. So he's very interesting. And you briefly mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster, 5,500 against Indy. That is, somebody I'm probably going to have a ton of, and will allow me to get to the Austin Ecklers at the running back position. We mentioned the Jets, Garrett Wilson, 5,400, Elijah Moore, 5K. Like, there's just so many guys in this 5 to 6K range that you really can comfortably pay for these running backs up top. And you can, pair 3 of these guys with 1 elite wide receiver. And that's how you save your salary, because there's not really, I'll let you touch on, bottom of the barrel guys, because I don't really see any this week like we had last week. Like, obviously, there was the Colts situation, and we had Greg Dortch as the obvious $3,500 play last week. He scored a touchdown, but I don't really see there's nobody popping off the page like that for me so far. Maybe I've missed somebody due to an injury I just haven't caught, but I just think my build as of right now is going to end up with a couple of these 5K, 5,500, 6K guys at receiver, maybe fitting in one Jamar Chase type guy, and then fitting in Fournette and trying to get to Eckler at running back. So it's basically all this to say is I think my build is going to be more balanced from a salary standpoint as opposed to stars and scrubs.
Yeah, and I completely agree with the sentiment on the this 5K range. There's so many different options through here that you already took. I mean, Drake London was something I was absolutely going to talk about. The dude is just has played very, very well over the first 2 games of the season. There's nobody else there to really pull targets away from except for Kyle Pitts, and that's really the end of the list. But I think there's a few options down here in the 4K range if you want to get a little different. I think Treylon Burks can make a little bit of sense at $4,900 going up against the Raiders. The Raiders secondary is not very good, and we're starting to see this. Treylon Burks, that is, get a little bit more opportunities here. Last week, he's not playing a ton of snaps. He played 36% of the snaps week 1 and 47% of the snaps in week 2. But other than that, I think he could be somebody that could, especially in just because of the matchup, I think could be a direction if you wanted to go there. I think that, I already mentioned the 2 Chiefs wide receivers. If you want to take some shots here on Marquez Valdez-Scantling and McCole Hardman, especially with the Gus Bradley defense that plays single high, that is going to open things up for, we know Patrick Mahomes wants to take shots down the field, but he's learned to be a little bit more patient. But if they're going to stick with a single high look, then expect the Chiefs to really open this offense up and really start airing it out. That's exactly what we saw last year whenever they played Gus Bradley defenses both times. And then from there, Chris Olave at 4,500. The dude has the set. I think it was the 3rd highest air yards since they've been tracking the stat. He had over 300 air yards last week in one game, which was just absolutely ridiculous. He saw a ton of targets in that game as well. Last week, 13 targets in that game, 5 for 80 on 13 targets. So if you want to take a shot on him at $4,500, because that opportunity is definitely going to be there. And then Greg Dortch, as long as Rondell Moore continues to be out, Greg Dortch makes sense. I feel like he's like the TFA or the DFS DGen guy that we've talked about both weeks of the season as being a very viable option, and he has paid off both weeks. So he is $4,300. I think you could go there if you wanted to get a little bit different. But I think that's really as far low as that I would really feel comfortable going. We talked about some of the Bucks guys. Like if you wanted to go with like a Scotty Miller, if all these guys are out, I mean, he led the team in targets, I believe, last week with 8. He's only $3,800. We've seen him pop off before with Brady. And then you have like Romeo Dobbs, who you want to take a shot. I just can't. Like he's just not getting that much opportunity. And the rest of them are very much like just complete and utter dart throws. So I don't think you really need to. I don't love the 4K range, but those would kind of be the guys that I would look at if I wanted to pay down. But for the most part, like you mentioned, like I think this 5K range is pretty juicy. Like Allen Robinson, love that call. Drake London, absolutely love him as well. I think both those guys could definitely, pay off, especially their pricing. Juju Smith-Schuster, love this matchup for him. And so, he's only 5,500. And so I think those are probably the 3 5K guys that I really like. Rashad Bateman, I think, is interesting as a play, but he's still not. I mean, he's seeing an okay in terms of target share. 7 targets last week, only 5 this week before. It's going to really depend on what kind of game this is, though, against New England too, as well. Like this feels like this could be a little bit more of a gross game. Last week, obviously they played against that wild ass game against the Dolphins that just went absolutely nuclear in terms of fantasy production. Like you basically had to have, kind of Lamar or Tua, and then to go along with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle last week, both who scored over 40 plus DK points. So I don't expect that again this week. And so, I don't mind going with a Rashad Bateman, but this game just doesn't feel like something that I think you have to target And so I don't, like I said, I don't mind it. But and then T Higgins, $6,100 is criminal. He should be at least 7K. There's no reason he should be $6,100 in this matchup against the Jets. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I do like that call as well, going with him. So I think for me, in terms of the top guys, I haven't really mentioned him that much, but I think Devontae Adams is in a prime bounce back spot. We just saw Stephon Diggs annihilate this secondary that they have. So $8,400. Devontae Adams, I think, is a nice pivot off these higher priced Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. I totally agree with you on Chase, and then AJ Brown, definitely agreed there. But then I also have a lot of interest in Michael Pittman at $6,900 as well against the Chiefs. They're going to be playing from behind. He is definitely the alpha in this offense. So that being said, those are kind of the wide receivers that I'm really looking at the most.
Yeah, and I did some scrolling while you were talking. There is one guy that's rather cheap that I have interest in, and that's Zay Jones at 4K. The Jags playing the Chargers. We saw they had to air it out week 1 when they played Washington, and they didn't have to at all this past week. So, none of their guys got a ton of volume outside of Christian Kirk, but his was more efficiency than it was total volume. But yeah, Zay Jones, he had 9 targets in week 1 against Washington in a game that they trailed for, the majority of the day. And they are definitely going to be trailing against the Chargers, assuming Herbert is playing. So I think he's interesting, and I think he's truly their number 2. I think Marvin Jones is starting to age to the point where he's more of a number 3 guy, and Kirk is their clear number 1. So Zay Jones is, I think, their number 2, guy in that offense in a game that they should be trailing for the majority of the day.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that either. All right, let's go ahead and jump over to tight ends. And like I already mentioned, Travis Kelce is $1,000 more than any other tight end at $7,900. Mark Andrews coming off a really big day at $6,900. Darren Waller at $5,800. Kyle Pitts at $4,800. Dallas Goedert at $4,700. Zach Ertz at $4,600. Tyler Higbee, $4,500. Gerald Everett, way too cheap at $4,400 in my opinion. $4,300 Mike Gesicki, and then you have Hawkinson at $4,200, which feels really cheap as well for him. And then Dawson Knox rounds up the 4K and above guys. Are you going to play Travis Kelce? And 2, tell me why Gerald Everett's not the best play point per dollar at tight end.
No, I'm probably not playing Kelce. And it's solely because of ceiling, not because of floor. And 2, Gerald Everett is not the best play because his name is not Kyle Pitts or who was my other guy? Irv Smith. I like Irv Smith a lot, 3,100 this week.
I can give you Kyle Pitts, I guess, at $4,800.
$4,800 Kyle Pitts against Seattle, who historically plays a ton of zone.
No, yeah, that makes I got too excited. Yeah, $4,800, only $400 more expensive than Gerald Everett. $4,800 Kyle Pitts, but I mean he has been certifiably terrible. The only thing that would also worry me once again would just be that this game feels like it could be really gross and really slow pace. 2 teams that really want to run the football. And so that would be the only thing that would concern me. But at $4,800, it doesn't take much for him to pay that price off. So I do really like that call. I mean, I think if you wanted to go like a Tyler Higbee, who's been seeing a lot of targets in that offense, has 20 targets over his first 2 games, or first 2 weeks, 11 week 1, 9 last week against Atlanta. He's right there in between that as well.
Arizona gets absolutely obliterated by tight ends too. Higbee's such a good play this week.
Yeah. And then TJ Hawkinson, who's $4,200. I think you could go there as well as part of a game stack with like a Jared Goff or something like that. But in terms of pay down options, like, I don't know, like Cole Kmet intrigues me at $3,400, but the guy's done when I mean nothing, I mean he's done absolutely nothing. I don't even know if he's been targeted yet. If he has, he has 1 target or 2 targets, 2 targets through the first 2 weeks of the season. He's got a target a game. I don't know what the hell they're doing in Chicago. I was hoping that this offense was going to be better and under new leadership, but it has not so far. It has been maybe actually worse. than what it was before. So, and then from there, $3,100 Irv Smith. I do agree with you on that call. I think Juwan Johnson is kind of interesting in terms of he saw 5 targets week 1, 7 targets last week. He's only $2,900 for the Saints. And so, going up against Carolina, I think that is a direction if you really want to pay down. I like that. I like going with somebody like that who's only $2,900.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I'd probably just pay the 200 extra for Irv Smith in a offense that should score more points in the Vikings as opposed to the Saints. But it's all the same reasons. I mean, Irv got eight targets last week, and they eased him back in week 1 coming off that injury. So, yeah.
All right, so we're pretty much just going to play all the Kyle Pitts and maybe some Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett.
I mean, Kyle Pitts, he's going to end up smashing one of these weeks, right? Especially with everybody talking about Drake London.
Oh, yeah. So, all right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up tight end. Let's go ahead and jump over to defenses here on this one. And I'll be honest, I think you just throw a dart and hope one hits. Because, there's not, to me, at least this week, Cincinnati last week was, mega chalk for defenses. But there were just, better options around them. And then this week, there's nobody that just, truly stands out to me and down here in this really cheap range. The Texans at $2,600, I don't mind that at all against Chicago, especially as bad as Chicago has looked. I don't really mind that. If you want to go Atlanta at $2,700 or the Seahawks for that matter, either one of those I think could be viable options against each other.
Yeah, Texans were my when I did a first look earlier this week. The Texans were my placeholder defense at 2,600. It was them and the Raiders, but Tannehill just doesn't turn the ball over. He takes care of it, and they like to run the ball a lot. So Vegas, who doesn't generate a ton of pressure or hasn't through 2 weeks, I don't know. I just feel like that there's not. While Tennessee might not score a ton, it just feels like the Raiders just won't have a ton of chances for getting fantasy points.
I will say I also don't understand why the Eagles are only $2,900, as well as that defense has looked through the first 2 weeks of the season. And you have, Washington with Carson Wentz, who has a tendency of making some really bad decisions and turning the ball over. And so $2,900 Philadelphia, I think, is I typically don't like paying up for defenses, but I really don't consider $2,900 like a true pay up. It's more like middle of the road. Yeah. So I think the Eagles also make a lot of sense at $2,900.
For sure. I'm good with that.
So, okay. Well, that wraps that up. So why don't we do what we always do, and let's build a lineup.
Let's do it.
Why don't you start us off?
Leonard Fournette.
Okay, $6,500 Leonard Fournette. You know what? Let's go Joe Burrow.
All right, then let's try. I mean, we could double stack Burrow and just if he goes nuclear, I'll say Jamar Chase.
Yeah, you want to go Chase and Higgins?
Yeah.
All right.
And then let's run it back. You want everybody's going to play. If they were to play the Jets, they'd play Wilson. You want to play Elijah Moore to be different, and he's cheaper.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. So we need a running back, a tight end, a flex, and a defense. $4,400 remaining. Let's fill out this other running back role. I feel like we need a little bit of cash. Actually, what defense do we want?
We can start with the Bears.
The Bears defense at 38?
I'm sorry, I meant Houston at the Bears.
I was like, what?
Sorry,
we're all...
that game.
Yeah. Okay. So that helps. It gives you a little clarity of what we're gonna do here. Okay. So I'm gonna let me see if we can make this work, and I'm gonna play because I want action on this game, and I'm gonna play. I'm gonna go Dalvin Cook. No, that's not gonna happen. We're not gonna be able to do that. That only leaves $3,600 remaining.
What we could do is not play one of Chase or Higgins and play Hayden Hurst. Attach the tight end to our QB. But if Burrow's smashing, it's probably with Higgins and Chase, I would assume. But I mean, Hurst definitely can catch a touchdown. I mean, he's been involved. I mean, he's got 15 targets in 2 weeks. He hasn't caught a touchdown yet, but if he does, he'll get you 16 points.
You know what? I'm gonna do a little correlation here. We got Texans D. We're gonna go Dameon Pierce at 5K. Take out Cook.
All right.
So that leaves 5K tight end flex.
Okay, well let's go Pitts then.
5,300 remaining at flex. Ooh, Mooney. Can't do that. I would want to do that, but we're not gonna do that. You know what? We're gonna take a little shot here. We're gonna go Marquez Valdez Scantling at $4,700.
Works for me.
And if we wanted to make any other move, that would leave $600 remaining. If we wanted to do anything
we're
else.
so close to being able to afford Juju. We were 200 off, which we
Do
could
we
just
want
punt defense completely.
Yeah,
but
that's what I was about to say.
to get Juju in there.
Let's see. Cardinals, Washington, Jags, Indy, Miami, Detroit.
Yeah, I don't even know who you would pick though. Defense is gross down there.
Let's go Jags.
I'm good with it. Especially, I mean, if Herbert's hurt.
Yeah. All right, let's do that. Okay, we'll do that. So we go Burrow, Fournette, Dameon Pierce, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Elijah Moore, Kyle Pitts, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Jags D. And if we wanted to make any sort of difference or any sort of changes, we could always drop down from one of these Bengals wide receivers, like a Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, and make it a little bit different here. But I really like this lineup.
Yeah, it's a solid lineup. That Cincinnati Jets game, I'm telling you, nobody's going to play it. Literally nobody's going to play that game.
All right, let's lock it in. It has been entered. Thoughts of these two lineups: Carr, Cook, Fournette, Adams, Higgins, Olave, Irv, Burks, and Texans. D. I mean, I don't mind it. I don't mind that lineup.
Yeah, that's
Dalvin Cook, Fournette.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Carr to Adams. It's got Burks. Treylon Burks is the run back. Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's fine. So, all right. Well, with that being said, we don't talk about this enough, but and I probably should mention this every show, but I don't. But we have an absolutely free Discord that you can join. We have all the channels: Redraft, Dynasty, DFS. We have a DFS channel that gets going, especially on the weekends a little bit. I'd like to get more people in there, grow the old DFS side. But we, any sort of form of fantasy football is in there. It's absolutely free. You can find that in the comments of any one of our YouTube videos. Link in there. Like I said, it's absolutely free, so you guys can go ahead and jump in there. I appreciate everybody checking out the video, and I hope everybody has a great week 2. This slate looks absolutely amazing, and I hope I just want to hear about some people winning some money this weekend. So we will catch you guys on the next one. Bye.